Welcome into another episode of the Bad Movies Worst Opinions podcast, where we believe that everybody has a favorite bad movie. The only rule of the podcast that we must watch a movie rated below a 6.0 on IMDb. We were scheduled to watch Exit Wounds, Rob Brenton, but we could not watch Exit Wounds because our guest, Steven Spector, has COVID. We are going to push that back a week, but we are happy in a pinch to do I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. Sam Stueve joins us. This is your first time on the podcast, man. Happy to have you join us today.
It's great to be here. I've heard a lot of great things about it and finally happy to sit in on one.
This is our second Adam Sandler movie. The first one that we did was Mr. Deeds. Which one do you like more? Do you like this movie or Mr. Deeds?
I got to be honest with you. I don't think I've seen Mr. Deeds.
Really?
Which is surprising considering the number of Adam Sandler movies that I've seen. And maybe I have seen it and it's been a while and I just don't remember.
Deeds is better than this movie, by the way. Deeds to me was funnier than this movie. Now, Deeds is better.
I actually like this movie more than Mr. Deeds.
Really?
We'll talk about this movie more. This movie is rated a 5.9 on IMDb, 155,000 votes. So a lot of people offered up their votes for I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. It has a runtime of 1:15. It debuted July 20th of 2007. It had a budget of $85 million, made $187 million at the box office. So Adam Sandler, you know, is one of Hollywood's biggest draws. People came out to see I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry.
And one of the crazy things about Sandler, and I'm a huge Adam Sandler fan, is the Happy Madison Productions and the fact that everything that he does trickles back into his pocket. That's one of the reasons that he's one of the richest guys in Hollywood today, is because of the fact that he runs the production, he acts, he directs, he does the whole nine. He is a jack of all trades in Hollywood.
It's also why the same 19 people show up in all of his movies.
That's
if you're tight with Sandler, you're gonna like one of the other firemen in this movie. I'm like, oh, I've seen that guy in Anger Management. I've seen that guy in they're in everything, all of them.
Who is a better friend, LeBron James or Adam Sandler?
Sandler, he gives his people more money.
LeBron has done Maverick Carter a great service. You and I have no clue what Maverick Carter does, but we know who Maverick Carter is. True. Rich Paul met LeBron selling throwback jerseys at the airport. He's now the biggest sports agent in the NBA. LeBron is in the Homeboy Hall of Fame.
Yeah, but LeBron doesn't have that, next tier down. Like, that's the equivalent of Sandler making sure that Kevin James and Steve Buscemi and Chris Rock and David Spade are all taken care of. There's that next wave of people where you see them in a movie and you're like, I know that person. He's in Happy Madison movies, but you don't know that person's name. That's where Sandler thrives.
Well, and how many mid-level actors did he take to the top? I mean, these guys probably had no shot in Hollywood. Maybe they would have gotten a couple of small roles, but he gave them big roles, put themselves on the big screen, and they built careers off of it.
My favorite guy is the quarterback from The Waterboy. Like, oh, that's the quarterback from The Waterboy. Yeah. He is also one of the firemen in this movie. So this movie debuted at number one with making $34.2 million its first weekend. Harry Potter was number two that week. Harry Potter and Order of the Phoenix. Are you a Harry Potter guy?
Huge Harry Potter fan. I actually just took a trip back to Nostalgia Town and watched all 7 Harry Potter movies.
There's 7 Harry Potter movies?
There's actually 8.
There's actually 8.
Yeah.
Part 1 and part 2. Yeah.
By the way, that couldn't have been week 1 on Harry Potter. Harry Potter would have blown this out if it was week 1 of Potter. I'm curious if I knew what weekend Harry Potter came out, because Harry Potter was Marvel at the box office before Marvel.
This was actually week 2 of that. Up to this point, it had made $207 million. So just a great stretch for Harry Potter. Number 3 was Hairspray. Number 2 was Transformers. And number 5 for this week was Ratatouille. Came in with $10 million. So this was a pretty strong box office week 1 for Chuck and Larry. Let's just begin the podcast with this before we dive into the plot of this more. We all agree they could not make this movie in 2024.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We agree with that?
I don't know the way they made it. They can make it that way again. I think you could take the framework and do it again, but there are too many elements within the movie that do not exist in 2024. And we were talking about this before the podcast started. We started recording. There are moments that it is very cringy because it is a 2007 production that you're watching in 2024.
But I think one of the charms of this movie, and we'll get into it more, and why I think this era of comedy is lost, you should be allowed to push the envelope. You should be allowed to use real life events as a comedic vehicle without everybody getting upset. I'm with you. The movie misses some steps here, and the movie maybe doesn't translate 20 years later, 15 years later, the way that it should. But deep down, there is a message in this movie. And if there is anybody who has been, I think, at the forefront of this and trying to be progressive in his movies, it's been Adam Sandler. Like, there's a gay couple in Big Daddy and they're talking about marriage. That was in 2003. No other comedian was putting that kind of stuff in his movie. Sandler deserves a lot of credit for that.
Well, and even within the movie, he goes from the absolute derogatory, I'm going to be throwing around the homophobic slurs constantly throughout the beginning of the movie, to the reluctant return at the end, where he's the one defending the people in the hearing, saying that, this is an aggressive term. You're not allowed to say this term. This is the accepted vernacular. Please adopt it.
I also think, to your point, though, I think you're right. I think comedy has lost its ability to push the envelope a little bit. But I would say some of the stuff about this movie that they can't do again is not just the vernacular, which we all agree is not a thing you can do in 2024, but they use the gay community as a bit. And we now know as a society, like, taking a minority group and making fun of them as the backdrop of comedy is probably not in good taste. You can make this movie again, and it's a comedy about two people who are trying to game the system to get benefits from the government. The movie can't be two people pretending to be gay because there's an easy loophole. That's not the same anymore.
I 100% agree with you, but I guess back to my main point, I think we're saying the same thing here is, we could feel that same way about Rush Hour. Could you make Rush Hour in 2024? All of us love Rush Hour and think that it's funny. So the fact that we're all sitting here and we grew up watching these movies and laughing them, and we can agree some things, but even back to the 80s with Revenge of the Nerds, hey, you're not allowed to do that. American Pie. You cannot record Nadia in that way and broadcast it over the internet. Like, there's always been these moments in comedy. And eventually, just as a society, we just decided we don't want these movies anymore, period. And I think that's a misstep, is three people that obviously enjoy watching comedies, enjoy laughing, enjoy these kind of movies.
I'll say this to your point about American Pie. I think there are a lot of comedies that we watch and we rewatch for this podcast that, like, we look through the lens of 2024 and we say, ugh, there are moments that make us cringe, like the recording Nadia and putting on the internet. That is obviously a moment, but it is not the framework that built the entire American Pie. American Pie is not a movie about, hey, kids record other girl on the internet, profit, ha ha ha. It's a coming of age movie. This one, the main joke, the main consistent bit they keep going back to is they are just using the gay community as a loophole and then they make jokes at the gay community's expense. That's, I feel, different than a moment of cringe. This one, the entire framework is built around that.
Well, and keep in mind, they didn't just target the gay community in this movie. There were constant fat jokes. There were constant jokes against people of other races. It really is just kind of a step back in time, really, when you watch it, because what did the community look like in Brooklyn at the time? What was the stereotypical? How did they treat people of another race? How did they treat the gay community? Was this what Brooklyn looked like in 2000? What was it, 7 or 9? Obviously, it's not acceptable today. Obviously, that's not how it looks in 2024. And when we look back on rose-colored glasses, it's definitely cringeworthy.
Our movie begins with a little pickup basketball game is going down at the firehouse until it's rudely interrupted by Chuck's girlfriend and her twin sister. Right before we get to the good part, a fire is happening somewhere in New York City. This is a serious fire, and our heroes need to go upstairs to save a very large man.
Your fat joke point immediately, by the way, right off the jump.
I felt very conflicted here because I'm sitting there thinking, this is a mortally obese man. This is a big individual.
I haven't walked in 5 years. Yeah.
But then when they get him up and he's like, Mama, I'm running. I did laugh. It was funny. I found this part humorous.
And then they finally hit the stairwell and they're like, wait, slow him down. And then, of course, the scene at the bottom of the stairs where Adam Sandler's head is in a very unfortunate place and he lets one rip and they're just running away, trying to get away from that smell.
The part where he's going into the ambulance and he's like, somebody get me to a deli was hilarious to me. So Larry is having some trouble getting his beneficiary changed because he waited too long after the death of his wife. You can only change it under 3 circumstances: death, marriage, and divorce. Our guys are back out on the job, but this time our guys get into an accident that could have very seriously hurt Chuck in the process, but Larry takes the brunt of the damage. There's a lot of things that I think this movie gets right and wrong, like on the extremes of all sides. This movie only works if you believe in the relationship between Chuck and Larry. Like, if you believe these guys genuinely love each other and are willing to do anything for each other. And this scene, it shows their friendship. Hey, I bet you $1,000 to eat the rat. Adam Sandler gets into very serious trouble. And I mean, Kevin James is in some ways like willing to risk his personal health and safety to try to save his friend. This movie only works if you believe in their relationship.
Well, and then you build off of that and you go down the concern that he can't get his benefits changed. And it's really, there's a subplot about the loving father trying to make sure that he can take care of his children while he's still grieving the loss of his wife.
And I think I 100% echo your point here. The only reason this movie, if you were to redo it again in 2024, where I think you feasibly could, is because of that friendship between Chuck and Larry. He is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to make sure that he, the loving father, has his kids taken care of. Because we also get, and we didn't really talk about it, in that basketball scene, you're really highlighting the fact that he's like a player, playboy type energy, but he also is like the great friend. He's like a great bro friend to have. And he is willing to make any sacrifice for his friend because he understands, hey, he needs to have his kids taken care of. So I'll do what's there necessary. And I do think they also do a good job in these first couple of scenes of showing their friendship and the brotherhood of firefighters. They do a good job of that throughout the movie as well. Firefighters aren't the same as, you know, The Office at is it Cerner or Oracle, wherever it is now. There's a brotherhood amongst that community. And I think they do a really good job of fighting that as well.
Especially a firehouse in New York City when you're dealing with a lot of big buildings, a lot of big fires, and you
post
find yourself
9/11 too, it would have been,
in those situations where your life is put on the line. And that's keyed on many times throughout the movie, how they are a brotherhood and they will do anything to make sure the other one is safe.
Was I the only one that when I saw Tila Tequila, and was like, oh, that's Tila Tequila. I hadn't seen Tila Tequila in 7 years. I forgot about her. What is she up to? She had a good run there for a while.
So this is 07. When I saw her on screen, I also thought there's Tila Tequila. I thought to myself, that's probably a massive cameo because that's probably when A Shot at Love with Tila Tequila was on television. That's probably when she was famous. You're a little younger than us. Do you even know who Tila Tequila is?
I don't.
That's probably a major cameo for 07 world.
Yeah, that's a big difference because at this point, like no one had ever done a dating show. So it was a dating show where she dated both men and women. Like what in the, I've never, this was a thing back when this was a television show.
Which character? It was Tila Tequila.
She
was one of the young ladies in the room. So whenever he comes over and they have the conversation and then they show the room and those 7 girls come out of the room,
including Dr. Honey.
Dr. Honey, who was a baddie, by the way. But I don't want to skate past that part, a baddie. One small complaint I do have about this movie, and I get it. Like, you really helped me in these podcasts, in these movies. They're going to take everything to the umpteenth degree. They made Adam Sandler, it wasn't like he was just a cool playboy. They made him like a deranged sex addict. He's getting 500 condoms sent to the house and he's getting blow up dolls. It wasn't like he was just a cool, hey, I'm the toast of the town, I'm Mr. February. He was fucking anything moving.
It's one of those things where you mentioned that I bring it up on the podcast a lot. I sometimes have to catch myself and be like, they are doing this for the comedic effect. So like, I need to like stop looking at it through like real world view. But you're right. They don't make him, we all have that friend who's like, wow, he does really well with women. He's not that. It's like he's Hugh Hefner on steroids. There's no way a firefighter, Mr. February, would be like, hey, every woman in Brooklyn got a run at him. That's just, come on now, it's too much.
Well, and we talk about the theme of looking back on it with rose-colored 2024 glasses and the hypersexualization of every single female character.
Yes.
If you watch throughout the movie, you don't see their face first. You don't see a single woman's face first, except for the maid. You see her face first. Outside of that, it is something about their body, whether it's their butt, their front side, just hypersexualizing every aspect of that character.
You can say titties on this podcast.
Okay.
You don't just gotta say front side. You can say titties on this podcast. So it is 4 a.m. and that's the time that all great ideas start. Larry is interrupting one of Chuck's late night romps with an idea. The two should get married to make sure that Larry's kids gets his benefits if something to him happens in the field. Glenn Aldridge shows up. He is an investigator from the pension department. His job is to make sure that everything is on the up and up regarding their domestic partnership. Everything was not on the up and up.
Now, that's a key right there because you had mentioned marriage as if the plan initially was to get married. That was not the plan because at the time in the state of New York, you could not get married to somebody of the same sex. And so their goal was to go the domestic partnership route so that he could transfer the pension.
One thing I did not like about this movie is that when I watched this, the idea of the pension investigator reminded me, and it's not a 1-for-1, but it seemed like the same concept as a villain that we got in Big Daddy. It's the government official who's making sure everything's on the up and up, and turns out, it's not, and I get to report you. It's the same. And it's fine if it's just two similar movies, but it annoyed me because I'm like, Adam Sandler took the core of Big Daddy and thought, I'm going to build a relationship with this person, and it's designed to help this person, but we got to avoid the big bad villain that is government bureaucracy and like meddling government. And then, we have the problem. It's the same. Nothing about that formula is different. They just changed the outside. It's no longer the, foster parent system keeping an eye on it. It's now the pension people keeping an eye on it. It's the same concept. I'm like, he's doing the same movie just 10 years later.
Larry's kids, were they in the movie too much, too little, or just enough?
I think they were in there just enough.
I think if they're selling me on he's a super duper loving father, I need to see more of him being that super duper loving father. We get a little bit of it, but we just believe it because of Chuck keeps saying it. Like, I want to see more of it.
I actually wanted more of the daughter, and I thought there were enough gay jokes in here that we also didn't need to. I mean, the son's only purpose is that the son was gay. Like, the son was gay. Mm-hmm. Like, there was enough in there. I also didn't need his son to be the musician, tap dancer, where his daughter has one of the best scenes in the entire movie at the very end of it, where she talks about the animals. Like, I actually wanted a little bit more of her in this and possibly a little bit less of the son, maybe tone down his character just a little bit. And
amid the cringeworthy backdrop of all of the homophobic jokes and all the whole nine, you have Adam Sandler, who is kind of the forefront of that throughout the first, 2/3 of the movie. And there's that sweet little scene where he turns the cleats into tap shoes so the son can do what he wants to do.
His son was actually a pretty good dancer.
My God, that was awesome. Yeah.
His son was Gregory Hines out here.
But you're right. That's a moment where I don't mind, like, if you read this movie, and I know I'm going to harp on that a lot, I don't mind if the son's gay, but there's a way, like that moment with the tap shoes, there's a way to like connect it where it's like, hey, these two father figures now are like, hey, I got you. You can be different. You can be, and like, but instead it's like they just use him as like a trope to be like, look, another gay person. It felt too bitty at times.
Larry wants to meet the lawyer to make sure that he and Chuck are protected. We meet Jessica Biel, who plays Alex Madonna, who lets them know about a similar case in Colorado and what happened to all involved parties. Is this peak Jessica Biel?
Yes.
Let's get that question out of there. Yes. Is this peak Jessica Biel?
This is right around the time that Timberlake probably started dating.
I think so too.
This is right at the.
I think this is peak Jessica Biel.
Is this her most famous acting credit? Like, let's be honest.
I agree. I had that as our next question. Just really quickly on how she looks. She looks amazing every single time that she is on the screen. There is not a scene where like, no, she's okay. At the grocery store, she's banging. When they go at their little shopping montage, she looks incredible. This is the best I've ever seen Jessica Biel look. And she looks better than this. And we even saw her in Summer Catch. She looks better than this than she did in Summer Catch.
I agree. And that's why I'm like, this might be her most famous acting credit. Like, I don't have her IMDb in front of me, but I'm trying to remember, like, what was Jessica Biel in that you'd remember other than this movie? Like, maybe she was in one of those, like One Tree Hill, or she was in the Seventh Heaven.
Yeah, she was in Seventh Heaven, yeah.
Maybe you know her from that. But like Jessica Biel, like when she became into the zeitgeist, this is that movie. And then she marries Timberlake and kind of falls out of that role forever. Like, she never had another major gig.
Well, and also the ultimate actress to cast for the temptation, the tempter of the absolute sex hound 100%. Trying to keep the charade going.
But she's also the temptress in the fact that she's extremely gorgeous, but it's not just like, ditzy moron gorgeous, like those girls we saw come out of his room earlier, where it's like the Tila Tequila type. There's like, she has depth to her on top of being gorgeous. She plays the role very, very well.
Adam Sandler always hooks up with the lawyer. You mentioned the Big Daddy similarities. Who does he eventually get with in Big Daddy?
The lawyer.
Huh. I didn't even pay attention to that.
The lawyer. It's
the same. It's the same formula. Yeah.
A lot of this is the same trope. Like, now that you mentioned, I wasn't paying attention to it, but
it was in my note. It's just gay Big Daddy. That's what this movie is.
If it works, don't fix it.
So Jessica Biel tells him that the best way to keep the feds off your back is to take a trip up to Avril Lavigne's home country to get married. It is important to remember that love is like circle. That's still funny to me. You want to talk about the most quotable line from this whole movie? It is, love is like circle. When you lie, it's like circle. That part's funny to me.
Well, and they bring it back 3-4 different times, and then even at the end, you had mentioned when you lie, it's like a circle.
Because, it's funny every time I hear it.
It's a character that, like, when I watched it, I was laughing, and I was like, it's kind of cringy to laugh this guy. And then they slap him. Oh, that's how we get down. Okay, a little slap for me. No, we're not going to do that.
So we've got trouble. Clint Fitzer has shown up to investigate Chuck and Larry's situation even more. While shopping for gay things, Chuck runs into the hot lawyer who invites the couple out to an AIDS benefit. The benefit seems like a rockin' good time. We meet Alex's brother and find out that Chuck is the catcher. I did like the running bit of Chuck being the woman.
Oh, yeah.
I thought they kept paying it off every single time, and it did make me laugh.
Because he had that hypermasculinity role. He had the I am the sex addict. I am the one that dominates in this field. I am the ultimate lion among the lionesses. And everybody is painting him as the female in that relationship.
It is time for a dance battle, and our favorite pair breaks out to do a junior high slow dance. Outside of the function, there's a group of protesters. After a back and forth, Chuck eventually knocks one of them out, which lands them on the front page of the New York Daily News and in front of their captain, who warns them about the scheme that they have cooked up.
Oh, I know it's not a cameo. Dan Aykroyd being the captain like threw me off for a minute. I'm like, that's Dan Aykroyd. Like,
yeah,
that's another thing we talked about earlier with Sandler taking care of his people. Sandler does a really good job of, hey, you're a big time actor. You went to a small time, probably 2 days of shooting, bing, bang, boom, on to the next. Like, Dan Aykroyd is an 80s icon, and he's playing the captain. He's like, come on, guys, let's stop it. Like, any schmo can play the captain. They got Dan Aykroyd.
This is where we were just talking about where I think the movie gets some things right and where I think the movie gets wrong. When they are outside the protest and, it's the back and forth. There's a scene there where they cut to it where when the protesters are yelling at the attendees of the AIDS benefit, you can see how it really affects them. And it's, hey, we just want to live our lives and we just want to be ourselves. Like, why did you choose to come down here on a Saturday night to bother us? We are out of your way. We're having our good time. Like, that part is where the movie gets some things wrong. But again, I really think, like, deep down, the movie is trying to prove a point, and it's awkward at times. It's clumsy sometimes, but the message is be who you want to be, love who you want to love. You're not bothering anybody.
Well, and I've mentioned the triumphant return at the end of the movie a couple of times. That was kind of the beginning of that shift, is because Adam Sandler was finally put into that situation where he was being the one that was assaulted by the same comments that he made early on in the movie, and they threw the F-bomb at him, and that's when he throws the punch that gets them on the front page of the news.
I agree with you. It's clumsy, and I don't think they do it great at all times, but they do try. I also think it does a good job of, like, multiple times I caught myself because I was like, this is New York. Did people really anti the gay community? And come on, it's New York. It's like one of the more liberal states we have. But then I thought about it. I'm like, it does not matter the location. In 2007, it was way easier to be anti-gay than it was to be like, this is just who I am. Let me live my life. And locally, we have Westboro Baptist. They protest everything. They're the worst. But I imagine even in liberal New York, there were people who were like, I'm anti-gay, so I'm going to go to a benefit like this and protest and be angry. It was a different time where nowadays you wouldn't really see that. Like, you wouldn't see, like, Westboro Baptist is an extreme example. They still do it, but like, go to a wedding a gay wedding in Colorado, go to an event that the LGBTQ community is supporting pick a liberal state. I don't think you're going to see the resistance. But in 2007, that was not the way we looked at society. They were the lepers. And I think this movie does do a good job of being like, look, they're people. And that's not how a lot of people felt in 2007. I'm
with you. I think this movie just shows a lot of progress where, you mentioned the homophobic slur. That was a word that people said in 2007.
All the time.
To now hear it now sounds to us like that's one of the worst things that you can possibly say. Like, the movie, I think, does do it. It is a snapshot of the time and how people felt. And now rewatching it in 2024, it also shows the progress that 3 straight men like us can hear that word. And you're like, ooh, you can't say that. Like, come on.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Well, and you talk about how there's all the protesters in New York. You kind of have to, and I think Adam Sandler maybe was bringing this into that scene. You have to look at the history of the gay community in New York and the whole Stonewall movement.
That's fair.
And they're fighting for their rights. And they had so much pushback to the point that even the entire police department was constantly raiding their clubs and kicking them out and trying to push them out of the public eye.
Did you like the shopping montage?
Yeah, I thought it was tasteful for the movie, especially as he's trying to build the charade that he is in fact gay, because she's obviously a little bit suspicious. You can kind of tell, obviously, in the role that she's playing, that she's accepting him and his claims, but she wants to get a little bit closer to him and make a friendship out of it.
I thought there were moments in the montage that were funny, and it's only funny because he doesn't know how to be, gay. We're like, we now know, like, society, like, you can be like Mr. Jock, super masculine guy and still be gay. And it's only funny because in 07, we think of the gay community as like only the flamboyant Elton John type. And Adam Sandler's playing that trope. It's like, oh yeah, no, it looks great. Like he's like being like the help dress guy. We're like,
it relied heavily on the aggressive stereotypes. Yeah,
exactly.
So it is career day for the kiddos, with Larry invited to speak about his job. None of the questions are about his job, and he gets into an altercation with another parent who is freezing him out because of his lifestyle. The girls' day is wrapping up with Chuck and Alex, ending back at her place where she changes in front of him and also wants him to feel her boobs to make sure they are real or not.
The scene where he's like, "Ooh, not a fan." Like, I did chuckle. I like pecs.
Yeah,
you were selling it.
Yeah, you chuckle because Jessica Biel is just, my goodness.
Yeah,
it's just that's all I got. My goodness, this is the best scene in the movie. It ain't got nothing to do with the plot of the movie, but watching her take her clothes off and then she turns around, you're sitting there thinking, this is a extremely beautiful woman.
Well, and you mentioned the Kevin James scene where he gets in the fight with the parent, and the fact that he is now being pushed out of all of the loving father duties that kind of is built around his character. The whole plot is he's trying to make sure that his kids are okay, and now he can't be the loving father and the masculine father that he wants to be because of the image that has been put on him.
Do you know what I thought during this scene, the Jessica Biel scene? And it was the one thing I was like, this movie's PG-13. Do you know why every 13 to 17-year-old boy came to see this movie? It's not just that Adam Sandler's funny. That scene. That is why the box office was big. I was 16 at that time.
That's an iconic comedy scene right there.
I'm 16 years old. I go see that movie. I came for that scene. If you're 13 years old, I'm going to go see PG-13 movies now. You go for that scene. When this probably hits DVD, some 11, 12-year-old, this parents wouldn't let him go to see the movie, plugs this in because of that scene. That moment is what the draw was for straight 13 to 17-year-old boys. They didn't know they were learning about being more accepting of the gay community. They just thought Jessica Biel's boobies are there. Boom.
This is one of those things, how like there could be certain still shots of a movie. Like if you see Forrest Gump sitting on the bench, oh, that's from Forrest Gump. Or you see Tim Robbins and the rain is falling down on Shawshank Redemption. If I showed you the behind, oh, that's from I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry. It's one of those iconic scenes in a movie. Jessica Biel, I'm telling you, you deserved an Oscar for your role in this film. So the guys don't want to play ball with Chuck anymore. And while getting some shots up, we learn that Ving Rhames is also gay. And he comes out to Chuck on the court and in the showers in front of the guys. I hated the drop soap scene.
Really?
Yes. Didn't need it.
Yep.
Didn't need it.
Yeah.
We didn't need it.
You mentioned this movie relied heavily on stereotypes. That is the epitome of a stereotype. We didn't need that. You can have Ving Rhames come out, and you can have the big burly tough guy come out, and that is an important scene. But then we drop the soap. I mean, what are we doing?
There was also a racial element to that scene with him being the guy in the middle, the one black guy in the middle, causing all the problems, and all the white guys on the outside. Like, what is going on?
I just thought that it was such a heartfelt scene where Chuck gets ostracized from the group. He's playing basketball. Ving Rhames comes out there, and that part seems very relatable. Hey, you being yourself has allowed me to feel more comfortable with myself. Like we mention this in sports all the time, how, there was a time where if an athlete had come out and said they were gay, it'd have been the #1 story in the country. Now, if it comes out, you're like, okay, but like it took people like Michael Sam. It took these instances to make this not a big deal. So I understand that point. To then me to kind of undo it in the very next scene with another very lazy drop the soap trope. I just didn't like it. I talked earlier about how during the montage they relied on the stereotypes of like gay is very flamboyant. They introduced Ving Rhames as a gay member of the community, and he's not that. He's just big, strong, burly, super masculine guy like I talked about earlier, and he just is gay. And then I feel like you undo almost all of that with an unnecessary shower scene. We talked about this movie in 2024, 2007. I think that moment hits the Ving Rhames' comes out moment, but you can't then have the ensuing scene be the shower scene. You can't have it back to back.
Well, you have the dichotomy of when they're first on the fire truck in the beginning, they're looking at him like they are scared of him. Yeah. Like he is some sort of threat. Murderer. You don't want to cross that guy. Yeah. He's going to rip you to shreds. And then immediately after he comes out, he is 100% flamboyant, singing in the shower. I can't imagine that he was doing that prior to that in the universe of this movie.
I just wish then that he would have came out to his fire mates at the hearing later on, because when he stands up and says, I think that's where we can communicate the exact same thing, and just I think give his character a little bit.
Or you have him come out the way he came out, and then you can have the rest of the movie, the firehouse pivots, and they now become like allies, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But instead, you have this shower scene, which a little bit undoes it to me.
Alex and Chuck continue building together after some foot rubs and flirting, which eventually leads to a first and second kiss. Clint Fitzer is continuing to poke around the couple's business, and he's close to bringing this scheme down.
Is this the real quick? I apologize for interrupting. Is this the scene where he's like, "We got to make our trash more gay"? I did not like that scene.
That was a little bit earlier.
I didn't really understand that one either.
Like he's poking around the trash, and then Kevin James comes running in. We got to make our trash more gay. Gay up the trash. I'm like, first off, no pension fund member is sifting through trash to find gay or straight materials. Gay or straight materials just aren't like. There's no
what were
such
they
thing.
even looking for?
Exactly. And then Kevin James like, we have to gay up the trash. I was like, it was earlier, so I apologize for the out of sequence here, but I'm like, I did not like that scene one bit.
Yeah.
I actually thought the part I did laugh about that scene was when they were going through like entertainment choices. So it was like very gay and it was Village People. That part was funny, but then they're going around and he's like buying cucumbers and stuff. Like, that part didn't do it.
The
all
two
the way
lemons
for
and
me.
the cucumbers.
Yeah, they're trying to buy only phallic foods. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, so Clint Fitzer is poking around the couple's business. He's close to bringing it down. Meanwhile, Chuck and Larry get into an argument and their first marital spat mid-rescue about how the relationship is turned into work and Larry's inability to move on from his deceased wife, Paula. I think the movie just really nails emotion. Like, you feel for Kevin James' character, even though it's been 3 years and you should be moved on in this context. Hey, no one sleeps on her side of the bed. Her stuff is still up there.
Mhm.
Like, the movie really has to sell you on the why. Why is this happening? And I thought the movie did that. The movie sells you. I understand how it was so hard for Kevin James to fill out the paperwork to get this done. Now this traumatic things happen. He's in a bind and he comes up with the one thing that he thinks can get him out of the situation.
Well, and that was the whole reason he didn't fill out the paperwork to get the pension changed in the first place, is because he was grieving to the point that he wasn't even opening any mail that had her name on it. He was just putting it in a drawer and pretending like he wasn't feeling the pain that he was feeling.
Also, this is to that point about the fight at the firehouse. I think, or when they were fighting a fire, excuse me. I really, really like this because we all have really close friends who have gone through a breakup. And you think to yourself, man, I need to tell Joe Schmo, hey, it's time to move on. Ain't no one care that you went through a breakup or a divorce. But you as a friend feel like it's not my role to tell this person to move on. And I feel like Adam Sandler probably felt that. This is my guy. We're boys, but it's not my spot to be like, hey, time to get over your dead wife. When he gets thrust up into the husband role, that's when he realizes how hung up Kevin James still is. And that's when he has, I don't know, the courage, but he has a new role and he can say, hey, it's time to start to move on. You can't have her on one side of the bed. You can't have her drawer full of her unopened mail. We're not saying you can never, just forget about her, out of sight, out of mind, but you have to start to progress forward. And I like that scene because we have friends that go through stuff and you feel like I ain't close enough to do that. Adam Sandler probably felt that way until he was bumped up a level or 2 or 3, whatever the levels are. And then he had the courage to be like, hey, it's time to step up.
Well, and a great comedic choice with the guy stuck in the chimney saying, can you just call a different fire department?
He said, when he said, I peed on my face, made me laugh too. And to your point with what you just said, Sam, his grief also stopped him from taking care of the 2 most important things in his life. His kids are in danger because of that grief, because you couldn't fill this out. You didn't fill out the paperwork, and now you left your family unprotected in case something happens while you're out in the field. So back at the firehouse, the rest of the guys have voted Chuck and Larry to be transferred to another firehouse. The captain doesn't go through with it, but is going to split the 2 up from their shifts. Larry goes down to confront the guys about the petition with how Chuck and Larry have always been there for the team. Chuck and Larry patch things up. The son is ready for a school play, but Chuck is in the paper for his philandering ways. Alex needs reassurance before she goes to fight this thing in court that our pair are actually an item, and she reluctantly gets it from the pair, and we are off to the hearing.
I thought the scene following the petition when Kevin James was down there vying for Chuck, and Yeah, Chuck.
Yeah.
When he was down there and saying, yes, when he saved your life, he was too gay to save it. When he saved your life, all of a sudden he's too gay to save it. And now he's not going to be on our shift because of your guys' opinion, not letting him live the life that he wants to live.
That's a great scene. Now, you talk about how this movie is clumsy at times and trying to like talk about how the gay community is not some ostracized, we should ignore them, you know, oh man, this please stay out of the light. This scene really does a really good job of that, because you're right, Kevin James hammers home all of them. I will say, and this is where I sometimes on this podcast get a little too realistic. The New York Daily News is talking about the sexual lifestyle of a firefighter. Really? There's no
page too.
There's no other news in New York going on. Nothing else is happening. The Yankees are up. Nothing. There's nothing in New York to the point where a firefighter in Brooklyn's sex life is now front page material.
But you have to keep in mind, though, that same firefighter's sex life was brought to the front page when he was outed as gay when he punched the guy at the protest.
That's probably fair. But in my head, I'm like, listen, it's probably news, but in New York, there's no way that's the front page.
This example, we don't have to spend too much time dwelling on because we talked about it. This is where the movie just shows a heart and shows a compassion. Hey, Chuck's sexuality does not matter. This is the same person that has been there for you through everything. Now you feel differently about Chuck because of this. This is where I think the movie just gets a lot of the things right. So it's hearing time, and the firefighters have all showed up to show their support. This is to the brotherhood you mentioned earlier in the movie. So the hearing is going great. The whole family is acing this thing. As the hearing is nearing its end, there's just one thing left. Fitzer wants the two to kiss one another as a showcase of their love. But right before the two go through with it, the captain shows up, which finally leads to the two coming clean. The two are headed to jail, and firemen stick together. But doesn't matter. Everybody is going to jail. The city has agreed to let everyone go under two circumstances. Chuck and Larry plead guilty to falsifying government forms, dropping their crime to a misdemeanor and avoiding jail time. And also, if they help raise money for AIDS research in the form of another calendar. This is where I mentioned earlier that I wanted the daughter to be in the movie a little bit more, where she tells the committee, listen to all these animals that also have same-sex relationship and can breed.
Mammals in particular, yeah,
that was a really, really good part in this movie. And as funny as it is to say about a comedy of this nature, like there was a lot of education in this about whether this situation or at the firehouse about how it doesn't matter what your friend's sexuality is that person been there for you? Do you care about this person? Do you love it? Like there is a lot of teachable learning moments in the middle of all the chaos in this movie.
And what did you think Steve Buscemi's role was? It kind of all came to a head in this meeting. What do you think it was throughout the movie? Because I kind of caught a glimpse of they were trying to paint him gay as well, trying to out the guys for not being gay. He wasn't just the villain as the inspector, but it seemed to me that they were trying to kind of throw in that weird curveball saying, oh, you're fakers and I'm the real gay guy and I'm going to prove it.
I never got that vibe.
I didn't either.
I never got that vibe. I just kind of got you needed the rules are rule stickler because, you know, the whole pushback is what you guys are doing is illegal. And there had to be some kind of confrontation in the movie. That's what I got. I actually like Steve Buscemi's character, Fitzer. He was funny. Like you need a over the top rules enforcer. Yeah. I thought he was pretty funny. He's chewing the gum. He's got the fanny pack.
But he puts it away and goes, I'll save that for later. Like, I don't know. There were just some weird elements that it seemed like they were trying to add a little more context to his character.
I'll add this. When Dan Aykroyd comes into the trial and says this is all a sham, the exact same as when in Big Daddy, Adam Sandler's dad goes to the stand. It's the exact same. I mean, the formula, they just changed the person and Dan Aykroyd as okay, let me tell you why they're faking. It's the same as Big Daddy when the dad was like, he's a terrible, unresponsible adult. He shouldn't take care of kids. It's the same.
God, they just really repackaged Big Daddy. I
can't believe you didn't see it.
You
liked Big Daddy.
I love Big Daddy.
The entire time I was like, I bet Carrington likes it. I told my wife when I watched this last night, I'm like, I bet you money Carrington liked this movie because Big Daddy is just gay Big Daddy.
I wanted to do Big Daddy, but it didn't make the cut.
No, it didn't make the cut because it's good.
Too good.
Because it's Adam Sandler's best movie. That's why. So we head back to Canada for Ving Rhames and Alex's brother's wedding. Lance Bass is singing. Great cameos in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Dan Patrick was in this.
He's in a lot of them, though.
Yeah. Lance Bass is in this one. Chuck goes over to patch things up with Alex after all the dust is settled. Both parties still have on the friendship bracelets that they made earlier in the movie. Larry is getting his Mac on with the new woman at the end. Fireworks are going on at the wedding. And this concludes I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry.
I liked the ending. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like we got Ving Rhames' character and the whole firehouse accepts him. We got the love story that came through with Jessica Biel and Adam Sandler, albeit it was an awkward love story at times. And we see Kevin James is now moving on, which was a theme throughout it was exactly what you want in a comedy. Everything gets wrapped up with a nice little bow, and we move on, and we get the funniest character, the priest, pastor, Justice of the Peace character back. I mean, it was a good ending.
Well, not to mention it was Alex's brother, right? Whose nickname was Butterfly.
Yep.
And he's finally getting his time to shine as well. Obviously, he had a few scenes at the gala earlier in the movie. And now he's part of the triumphant return, as they are now, instead of at the beginning of the movie fighting against promoting these stereotypes. Now they're fighting against it.
Let me tell you guys that this movie was not critically received. In fact, the exact opposite. Let's go through some of them. So Rotten Tomatoes has this as a 14% approval rating and an average rating of 3.8. The site's consensus reads, whether by inept comedy or tasteless stereotypes, I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry falters on both levels. Hold on. It continues on. This movie got crushed by everybody. USA Today calls this movie, it says, quote, a movie that gives marriage, homosexuality, friendship, firefighters, children, and nearly everything else a bad name. The Wall Street Journal said this movie is an insult to gays, straights, men, women, children, African Americans, Asian pastors, mailman, insurance adjuster, firemen, doctors, and people who love show music. You can't come out more against the movie. I could probably read another 5 of these things. This movie was not critically received well at all. That's interesting. So we've talked about this podcast about how in 2007 the world was different, and the vernacular and the slurs that are used throughout this movie are ones that the three of us now are like, ugh. But the fact that the critics in 2007 said, yo, this is okay, you're making fun of the gay community too much. You're being too stereotypical. This is a problem comedy. People are saying that in 2007. Maybe it's not us thinking, hey, it's just 2024. You can't do comedy anymore. It sounds like in 2007, people were like, what are you doing? You're trying to do this heartfelt thing, but you're doing it wrong.
But to your point about in the comedic landscape and you being cringeworthy, pushing the ticket, it pushed the ticket on so many different levels. I don't even know, we could do a whole nother podcast listing all the different ways that it crossed that line and did it in a comedic way. And it was funny. It obviously worked. It overtook Harry Potter in week 2?
Yeah, it absolutely did. I think you made this point earlier, Sam. There's only one comedian that we have ever seen that could do this movie. It's Adam Sandler.
Oh, yeah.
There's funnier people out there. There's certainly better comedies. Will Ferrell could not do this movie.
Oh, no.
Eddie Murphy could not, many funny people. They could not pull this movie off. This movie, we all agree, this movie is clunky at times. This movie has not aged well in some areas.
And if it were to be made today, the only one that could do it today is Adam Sandler because of the protections that he has.
I think there are a lot more actors that could do it today, but I don't think it's like the massive. I think you could put a more. You could use a gay actor like there's Andrew. He was on Broadway with Josh Gad.
The person that I actually think could do it is Billy Eichner.
Billy Eichner could do it, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Billy Eichner could do this. Like, if they wanted to remake I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry, Billy Eichner would be one of the two
I think you could have one of the Chuck or Larry be a literal out gay man in real life, was my point. And I think it would still work because, it would be kind of a part of like the joke. Like, he wouldn't do it, but like, what's Doogie Howser's actual name? Neil Patrick Harris. Neil Patrick Harris could do it, but like I think you would need an actual member of the gay community to be in this movie for it to work in 2024. It couldn't be Adam Sandler and Kevin James. You need someone else.
So we're gonna switch this up and do it a little bit differently here. What do you think this movie gets right? And then we'll get to what do you think this movie does wrong?
I liked the full package. When they brought it all together, I think that the story in and of itself and the plot line of going, and I keep repeating myself, of going from the absolute hatred for the gay community in the beginning, constantly dropping the F-bomb, constantly dropping stereotypes left and right. And we're not going to do that. We're bros. We're guys. We are this absolute masculine force. We're not going to do anything like that. To at the end, they are feeling for the people who they were victimizing in the beginning. And I think that's one of the biggest things that this movie does right, is the fact that they had that shift at the end to say, in the court scene, he turns around and he says the F-bomb is not an acceptable term. The accepted vernacular is gay. I mean, that was the big triumphant moment where they were like, okay, this is actually going to be mildly acceptable if you can get through the first hour and a half of cringeworthiness.
And it shows that Adam Sandler learned something over the entire process too. The thing I think the movie gets right is relationships. It gets the relationship right between Adam Sandler and Kevin James. It gets the relationship right between Adam Sandler and Jessica Biel. This movie is fueled off love in a lot of different ways. Like, you can feel the love that Kevin James has for his kid. You can sense the love between Larry and Chuck. This movie works because you believe in the people. That's why I think this movie gets right.
I think maybe this is just semantics. I'm saying it differently. I agree with Sam here. What I think this movie gets right is that in 2007, the gay community was ostracized by most people in the public eye. It was, we don't want to see that. You got to keep it to yourself. Don't do that. I don't want to see it. Why? Ew was the general sentiment.
Especially in a brotherhood like a firehouse.
Yeah. And I think this movie does a really good job of highlighting that, and they do it to the nth degree, that society was like, I don't want to see that. I don't want to know what happens. Stay out of sight, out of mind. And it does a really good job of showing like what I think the gay community went through in 2007 of they had to hide their lives because of the public sentiment was, we don't want to see that. And I think it does a good job of highlighting, hey, these are people too. These isn't like some what we do in the shadows moment. And I think it does a really good job of, to your point about Adam Sandler saying you don't say the F word, it does a really good job of showing why are we, pushing them into the shadows? Why are we saying ew when we see two guys holding hands? Why are we doing that? I think it shined a light on society. It did it clunky and clumsy, and we'll talk in a minute about what this did wrong, because I think there are far too many stereotypical gay jokes, and I think this movie might be better as not a pure comedy, but like one of those, like it's a dramedy or whatever. I think it would be better that way, because I think it relies too heavily on very stereotypical jokes. But I do think it does a great job of showing, why are we ostracizing this community? They are people the same way everyone's people.
Let's get to what we think they did wrong. We've said a lot of it over the course of the podcast. I'll throw one more out there. We did not need Teresa's character.
Yeah, that's
didn't need her. Didn't need her.
Which one was she?
She was the nanny who he sleeps with, and then we just didn't need her character.
She was excess, and
it just highlighted he's a playboy. But we'd already checked.
Yeah,
we'd
already established that. Yeah.
Rob kind of hit my thunder on what they did wrong. She also
just didn't add to the funny of the movie.
No.
We didn't need her character.
He kind of hit it on the head. It was the abundance of the cheap shots towards the stereotypes. Obviously, that was the main trope. That was what they were building all of the comedy around. But did it really need to go as far as it did? Did they need to make the soap scene that we've already talked about how they didn't need? It was just weak at certain points.
All right, this movie is a 5.9 on IMDb. Too much, too little, just right on a re-rank. Sam, Stevie?
Well, in 2024, that's too much.
I have this. If you want to chew on it from it, I have this too much too. And I mentioned a minute ago, I think this movie as a pure comedy is done poorly. I think that it's clumsy, it's clunky, and like I said earlier, it relies too much on gay jokes and things of that nature. And I think this movie, if it was like dramedy or a comedic drama or something where it had funny moments, but we are actually like, learning about the struggle of the gay community, I think it would be a really good film that people would talk highly about today. But it has that as the backdrop, and the forefront, what it slaps you with is clunky, stereotypical, bad gay jokes. So because it's trying to be a comedy and a lot of its jokes are built on the idea of making fun of the gay community, I think it is too high. I think this same movie can be done different and done better, and you would say, 5.9 is too low. They didn't do that, though. I think 5.9 is too high.
I also think in the spectrum of Adam Sandler movies, for example, Hustle, I think got a 7.3.
Hustle's great, by the way.
That makes 5.9 way too high. If we are comparing the two movies,
Hustle's great.
I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry compared to Hustle, it deserves like a 3. If Hustle was a 7.3.
Rob, what's your re-rank for this movie?
5.3, 5.2, 5.1, somewhere in there. I think it gets dinged like near a full point.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit too high now rewatching it. I came in, like, my memory of this movie was I thought it was a little bit funnier than like now going back to watching, because I remember just thinking it was really funny. And there's certainly parts that I laughed at in this movie. I'd probably re-rank it and give it between a 5.3, 5.5.
Like, I think underneath a 5's too low, but if you have like 5, if you said 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, I think that's probably the window I'm at.
Let me ask you this. Are we potentially, like, would this movie be a 6.2? Even though we said earlier that only Adam Sandler could do this, are we holding it against the standard of Adam Sandler has probably made 8 movies that we all think is funnier than this? Do you think that potentially knocks the rating down because we are comparing it against, I mean, he has made some classic comedies over the course of
comedies. I mean, he has so many movies, so many comedies that are family friendly, like Grown Ups, for example. Granted, there's elements of Grown Ups that are not family friendly, but as a whole, the tropes within Grown Ups, it is a family friendly and still hilarious movie.
There ain't nothing family friendly about this movie.
Well, yeah, I think that if you get to the endearing part sooner, I think that changes it. Because as I've mentioned already, you have an hour and a half of what in the hell am I watching before you're finally like, oh, well, actually, they do kind of have souls. They are loving people.
I don't think we're holding it against the Adam Sandler. I think it's the jokes. I think the comedy of this comedy is what misses. Like, obviously, Adam Sandler has much better films. I'm not acting like he doesn't. But I think one of the problems I have with this movie is not that it's Adam Sandler or like, oh, it's not as good as Billy Madison. I mean, it isn't. But I wasn't watching thinking that. I was thinking to myself, man, the parts that are designed to make me laugh, in 2007, I probably was laughing because I'm 16 and don't know better. But now it's like, man, we're poking fun at the gay community, and that's the only comedy we have. We have this heartfelt moment on the back half, which is great, but the entire gist of the comedy is we're just going to make fun of the gay community for 90 minutes. That's where it misses to me.
I think this movie also is better too as a 90-minute comedy instead of a 2 hours comedy.
I agree.
This movie is better. If you could, there's probably 4 scenes I could cut right now. I don't lose anything from the movie. I get you out of there in 90 minutes, and you maybe feel a little bit different about this movie. Sam Stevie, this was your first appearance on the Bad Movies Worst Opinions podcast.
I asked you guys before the show, is this the riskiest movie you guys have reviewed up to this point?
100%.
Probably is, yeah.
100%.
Well, I'm glad to be here for it, I guess.
So that is another episode of the Bad Movies Worst Opinions podcast, where we believe that everybody has a favorite bad movie. The only rule is that we must watch a movie that's rated below a 6.0 on IMDb. Are we doing Exit Wounds next week, Rob Brenton?
Conceptually, I would say yes, but you can't predict someone else's health.
You know what? We're going to go ahead and pencil in Exit Wounds for next week. I am excited. I've never seen Exit Wounds. You've never seen Exit Wounds. So we are excited to do it. We were supposed to do it today, but our guest had COVID. So happy to have Sam Stevie come in off the bench, knock a couple of threes down. You're like Anthony Edwards for us, for the team, for the Olympic team.
I'm glad to pinch hit, man.
Catch you guys next week.